really, really excited with doing this web presentation in partnership with EQ Saddlery. They've been a big supporter of Poseidon for a while, and we know that our sales are constantly growing with them. So thank you, Jeff, for being here, and thank you for being part of this presentation. So I might hand over to you and we can get started.
Thanks, Linda. EQ's really excited to be partnering to provide information that can help horse people to really understand how they can improve their horse's performance and what's happening with them. And so these type of seminars are a great way for us all to learn. I think a lot of you would know EQ has a massive range of veterinary and supplement products in our feed stores, in the 7 of them, and definitely Poseidon is an important partner. The subject today is sugar in horses and the impact on laminitis. And for many of us, including myself personally, I didn't really understand much about what the role of a flavonoid is. So we're going to hear that today from the presenters. The presenters are actually based in Florida in the USA. So great to have them on board. The second thing I want to remind you about, I don't know if you go to the next slide, but one lucky person today will receive a pack of metabolized 180 gram valued at $140. And at the end of the presentation from EQ, will announce a special surprise to everybody who's attended today. So I hope you learn lots of information. That's what it's about today, to get that information to you. And I'll hand back to Linda to run the seminar with Dr. Joe and Dr. Erin in Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks again for all your support. So for those of you who didn't hear earlier, I just wanted to reinforce that we are recording today's webinar and we will be sending those out to you. We will be placing polls up during the webinar. We'd love you to engage, ask questions. We have an amazing team supporting us today, answering questions. We will do our best to answer them as we go. But if we don't, as we always do, we will then get all of them answered post the webinar and send them out to you. So Dr. Joe and Dr. Erin, be ready for that, because I'm sure we'll get some amazing, amazing questions. So I am so proud to have 2 incredible guest speakers with us today. And I wouldn't do them justice if I didn't actually read out their bio, because they're both incredible, and we will learn so much from both of them today. So Dr. Erin Roddy, now she has a doctorate in veterinary medicine and equine focus, and we are so fortunate at Poseidon to have her as our head of veterinarian services, and we work with Erin very closely in so many aspects. Now, she's recently relocated back to the US, which is actually really exciting for us, because that's an area that we want to move more into. So Erin's role, she provides lots of guidance and information. We are very committed at Poseidon to make sure we give you the right information, that every time you come to us for a question or advice, we have experts providing that, and that's really important. We take that very seriously. Erin's also been involved in some of our product development and also our trials, particularly around Metabolize, which she'll talk about later on. She has always been interested in equine nutrition, and I know she's developed a great passion and interest in equine gut health. And she's seen firsthand, because she's a very competent show jumper, the impact of diet and gut on our horses' behaviour and performance. So thank you so much, Erin, for being here, and I'm so looking forward to hearing from you. Before I introduce Dr. Joe Ehrens, I should actually say who I am. I am Linda from Linda Goldsmith Law from Poseidon Animal Health, and this company is, I guess, it was my idea way back when, to introduce or share our knowledge and passion around equine gut health. And over the time since we've started, we're really proud to say we have become a company that people do trust, because it's not just about delivering incredible evidence-based supplements, it's about delivering education. And as a horse owner myself, I know that we do everything we can to deliver the best for our horses. And my passion in gut health came about because I had my own seriously challenged health issues. And once I learned about gut health, that changed my life. So I took that knowledge and that passion to horses, and it's just been growing. This year, we have been, so grateful to further our connections with our next guest speaker, Dr. Joe Ehrens. And I just said to him, check I've got the pronunciation right with my Australian accent. So Dr. Joe Ehrens is renowned for his breakthrough work in metabolic sciences. And after many years of research into food and nutrition, He is going to share those results with us today. He has a PhD in plant physiology. And I think you're the first person I've ever met that has that, Joe. I tell everybody that's amazing. And he also has a Bachelor of Science in Animal Physiology. So how lucky are we to have a speaker that has that knowledge and understanding of equine science and then brings that extra science and study. He's made several products which effectively address the underlying issue of inflammation, and I'm really excited to hear more about that today. And the expression of high blood sugar, pressure, weight management, psoriasis, asthma, arthritis, and even neurological disorders. In addition, a strong headway was made into tackling and curing Ebola and even the flu and the common cold. You're an incredible person, Joe. And for all of this work, has now been twice nominated to receive the Nobel Prize. So I think these bios speak for themselves. We are very, very fortunate to have both Joe and Erin here. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So how today will work is that we've got some topics that we'll keep working through. And whilst Erin and Joe will be talking to some of the slides, we want questions, we want interaction. And I will try and represent all of you horse owners around some of the questions. But what we will cover today is what is insulin dysregulation. And Erin will talk about how that terminology has changed a little bit and how do we manage it. Because as a horse owner, we know from the polls, so many of you have had horses with insulin dysregulation that it creates fear and it's almost like hopelessness. So how do we manage it? And we'll talk about how do we do that through diet? How do we do that through management and lifestyle? And that's where the role of stress and inflammation is very interesting. And then we'll talk about supplements. We'll move into the power of flavonoids, and I think Joe's probably going, about time that you got as excited as I am about them. The more I learn, the more I see them in action, the more I am just so, I'm not surprised that Mother Nature provides us these incredible ingredients that we seem to have taken out of our diets and our horses' diets. So we'll talk a lot about that, and Joe will be able to share his research. And then finally, what is Metabolize? And I know from the polls, a lot of you know about it, how it works and the science behind it. So let's get started. So, Erin, I'm about to hand over to you, and let's start with insulin dysregulation and how it happens.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you for the introduction, and very excited to be here with all of you from Florida. So we're going to start with insulin dysregulation, and effectively, insulin dysregulation is the new term for insulin resistance. We used to talk about insulin resistance a lot, and now we use the term insulin dysregulation. They're the same thing, it's just a change in terminology. It's an umbrella term that covers a set of signs and symptoms that we see in horses who don't process sugars appropriately. There can be a lot of reasons for that, but this is just an overarching term that clumps all those horses together. If we can go to the next slide, please, Linda. Yeah, perfect. Back one. Sorry.
You're right.
Yeah. So insulin resistance to a degree is actually normal in horses, which surprises a lot of people. And that's because in a natural setting, excess glucose in a horse's diet only occurs in the spring and summer months, while at other times they'd be consuming long stem forage that is likely to be much lower in starch and sugar. So in a horse's natural environment, we'd get a cyclical pattern where excess sugar in the body is stored as fat during the spring and summer. And then as the quality of feed decreases in the fall and winter, that excess fat is converted back into sugar, re-released into the bloodstream, and the horse can then burn that off, use it as energy. They would lose weight in this process and come out of the winter lean, ready to go back into spring and summer and start the cycle again. That cycle would be repeated each year of the horse's life, with fat stores being built up and being used. However, as we've domesticated horses, they've gone into a much more sedentary lifestyle. They don't graze, miles and miles, kilometers and kilometers looking for food. And they also have highly concentrated rations, and our, forage sources that we feed them now, hay, chaff, other forage sources, are calorie dense. They're getting that diet all year round. They're not experiencing the cycle of lean times and good times as they would have back when they were wild animals. Next slide, please, Linda. So keeping that in mind, we want to just really simply discuss how horses process sugar. This is a complicated idea, but we don't need to understand all the chemistry of it. We just need to understand it in a simple fashion. So when horses consume sugar, they break it down in the digestive process and into glucose. Once it passes through the digestive system, that glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream. The pancreas, in reaction to that glucose going into the bloodstream, releases insulin. Insulin allows glucose to be absorbed into sensitive cells, such as muscle and liver, where it can be used for the horse for energy. And also that excess glucose that we just talked about would be stored as fat. In a horse with insulin dysregulation, the pancreas still does its job. It reads that the glucose is in the blood, it releases insulin. However, in some cases, if a horse has been on chronic excess sugar for a long time due to its diet or due to its lifestyle, we can get a breakdown in communication between the insulin that's released and the receptors that trigger the absorption of glucose. In other cases, some horses have hereditary disorders or genetic predispositions that result in an abnormal amount of insulin being produced. In all of these situations, the end result is often the same. We end up with too much glucose in the blood and too much insulin in the blood, and that just stays there. And unfortunately, we now know that too much glucose and insulin in the blood sets off a cycle of inflammation, and that's where we get a key risk factor for laminitis. So coming off of that, we go to sugar intolerance and EMS. And a lot of people are confused about EMS in the same way that they're confused about insulin dysregulation. EMS stands for equine metabolic syndrome. It's another umbrella term that we, as horse owners and veterinarians, are hearing more and more. It's essentially a syndrome which is characterized by obesity, insulin resistance, and a predisposition to laminitis. There's a lot of causes. There are a lot of factors that result in a horse having equine metabolic syndrome, and equine metabolic syndrome doesn't present in each horse the same. But when we see horses with this grouping of symptoms, we can say that they have equine metabolic syndrome. The majority of horses presenting nowadays with chronic laminitis have it as a result of equine metabolic syndrome. So if you have a horse with laminitis or EMS or both, it's really important to try to understand this syndrome as much as we can, both what causes it and then how to manage it. Unfortunately, horses with equine metabolic syndrome are also predisposed to PPID, or Cushing's disease is the more common term for that, and that exacerbates the symptom of EMS. PPID or Cushing's causes an increased amount of cortisol to be released in the bloodstream. So now we have insulin, we've got glucose, we've got cortisol, all in too much, all in the bloodstream. That increases the inflammatory mediators in the horse, and that's why we see so much laminitis occurring in these animals.
And that is such a great explanation. And I know just before we started, we spoke with Joe about talking about inflammation. So we'll park that for now, but we'll come back to, because I feel like inflammation and stress is often overlooked as horse owners. So, but thank you. That's been a great explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, stress is certainly something we have to keep coming back to. And we need to remember that in all of these horses, we're dealing with hormones, and that hormone cortisol is a big factor in stress, and it's a big factor in a lot of these processes. So we need to keep thinking that, keep that in the back of our mind as we're dealing with these horses. So now we're going to try to help you with how to prevent your horse from going down this road, and also how to manage it if it has. In the past, we've only been able to manage diet and lifestyle and rely on medications to influence the glucose metabolism in the horse. However, as we'll learn this evening, we have a new supplement called Metabolize that's going to play a really important and exciting part in managing equine metabolic syndrome, in managing equine dysregulation, and preventing our horses from getting laminitis. A lot of people come to me and they say, okay, I have a horse, he's insulin dysregulated, she's insulin dysregulated. What do I feed her? How do I manage it? Where do I go from here? And it's scary and it's complicated and it's hard, and we are here to help you. The most important thing is you really want to maintain a free access forage-based diet. It's important, however, that you pick the right type of forage. We need to limit all feeds, forage, hard feed, anything this horse is eating. You have to keep the NSC value low, and we need to slow down the rate of consumption where required. So we're trying to keep horses eating the right things and keep the calories down. And It's not easy, but it is worth the effort. We want to avoid cereal grains and grain-based feeds, and we want to try to keep that NSC under 10 to 12%. Additionally, we do see actually more and more often, and we spoke about this in our last webinar, we see horses that require weight gain. Even though they have Cushing's, even though they have laminitis, even though they have equine metabolic syndrome, these are your horses that have big cresty necks, they have fatty lumps, but they're ribby and they're actually under condition. And that's a tricky group of horses because you want to add calories to those horses, you want to put weight on those horses, but you must stay away from grain, you must stay away from high starch and sugar feeds. So that's where a high fiber diet and fat is really important to add additional calories. Don't be tempted to go, oh, I know he has equine metabolic syndrome, or I know the horse has Cushing's and it's ribby, so I might go and give it some grain. That's not a good idea. We want to use fats and forage in those horses.
Can I just jump in there? I know that,
yeah.
I mean, as we learn more, we change. And I remember back to the early days, you know, I've had horses for a long time. I'm now 56. But in the early days, if you had a horse with laminitis, the veterinary advice was only feed white, so oat and hay, oat and chaff, and lock them up, put them in the starvation paddock. So, you know, we've learned now, haven't we? That's not what we do. And in fact, that starvation is just going to trigger that stress response. And there's that cycle that happens. So I think we're starting to understand it is complicated, but then the foundation is about they need to have access to fiber, to forage, to keep that. And it is really challenging. And you kind of go, well, if I take them off the grass and put them in the restricted area, how much stress is that creating as well? You know, like it is really tricky, but the research is changing and we now know that we don't want to starve them. And we get so many requests all the time about these things, and there's still that myth that we need to put them in a Jenny Craig pack, as you said, but we have to understand that just creates more stress for them.
Absolutely. So, you know, what we're trying to do, and that's why I started with what the horse would have experienced in a natural setting, is it's always important to go back and remember that it's a horse. And the more you can get it to live naturally, how it was designed to live, the healthier and happier your horse is going to be. So horses are designed to graze 18 plus hours a day, mainly forage that is low in sugar and high in fiber, long stem forage. You know, I always see people, they go, oh, I don't want to feed my horse bad hay. And certainly you want your hay to be clean and mold free. But the best hay is often not the best thing for your horse. So looking for healthy, but in theory, low quality forage is really, really important. And that can be challenging. And we get a lot of clients that say, oh, I can only get access to, you know, prime lucerne. And what am I going to do? How am I going to manage this? And that's where things like slow feeders, things like soaking hay are really important, and you do have to get creative. And that's one of the things we love about Metabolize, which we'll talk about later, is it can help bridge some of those gaps. And we're always here to help you. If you have questions about those sorts of things, or you need ideas, you need a different plan for every horse. And sometimes you do have to get very creative, and that's where it's good to reach out, get education, get help in finding the right thing to manage each horse. And that actually is really good. That will take us on to the sort of lifestyle management slide.
Erin, just before you jump on the next slide, can I just do a shout out to our free feeding program on our website, because it will make creating the diet easier. So we tend to underestimate the importance of having a balanced diet, like vitamins and minerals as well. And there's also a belief that if they're just getting out in the paddock, getting grass, they're getting everything they need. Well, maybe once upon a time they did, but we now know there are vitamin mineral gaps. So I recommend, if you haven't used Feed Assist, it's a great starting point, and it will help you pick a diet that is very much gut friendly, and will let you know whether you are actually meeting all your vitamins and minerals.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that gets missed a lot is the variety of forage that a horse would normally consume in nature. And now if your horse is in a yard or a paddock, or they're only getting fed one type of hay, you're really missing out on that variety of forage. And so that's where you are missing vitamins and minerals. And it's very important. We need to get these horses on forage only diet. We need to get these horses eating as much fiber as possible, and reducing grain and reducing sugar and those sorts of things. But often if we stop providing a hard feed as such, we are missing gaps in the vitamins and minerals, and that's not going to help a horse stay healthy. So very important that you're still feeding a balanced diet, even if it's a forage only diet. Make sure you don't miss that.
Already touched on some of these, Erin, so I might just quickly move through these slides. Did you want to quickly talk about the grazing time?
Yeah, so you know, again, we talked about reducing sugars in horses, sugar intake in horses. So it's important to know, especially if you have a horse that is laminitic, and is on good pasture, that you avoid grazing that pasture when sugars are high in the grass. And that it changes day to day and it changes seasonally. So that is something important to educate yourself with the seasons and the type of grass that you have, that you'll see different sugar hour by hour and day by day, and that can make a real impact on your horse's laminitis and how they deal with it. So something very important to keep in mind, changing their housing situation or using a grazing muzzle or things of that nature. And then stress. We mentioned it a little bit before with the cortisol and how that impacts the inflammatory mediators. But horses experience stress in a lot of forms. So intense exercise and training is stressful for horses. Travel, extremes of heat and cold, pain, even psychological stressors such as separation anxiety or fear can cause stress. Having an empty stomach is a major cause of stress in a horse. Horses are designed to eat all the time. They're designed to have a full stomach all the time. When they don't have that, that's scary for them. They feel that they are starving because their body is not designed. They're not humans. Humans are designed to eat once or twice a day, and that's fine. Horses are designed to eat all the time. So we always recommend everyday gut support with digestive EQ or RP and stress pace in acute times of stress. And, you know, really looking at the lifestyle and diet of your horse to try to reduce stress as much as possible. One of the things that I've been learning a lot about lately in stress is actually confinement as well. So locking your horse up in a box or in a small dirt yard is stressful for them. Even though for us, we might think, oh, the horse is safe in the stable or he likes the stable. Horses become accustomed to things and they accept them. It doesn't mean that they like them. So really take a look at what is natural for your horse, and something outside of what is natural will be causing stress, even if it's silent.
I might just jump in there. I'm thinking this could be a good time to have that conversation, Joe. We're talking about stress and inflammation, and we were just saying earlier that we tend to underestimate the impact of stress. And interestingly enough, I have a new horse. We've had her for a few months, so working on improving her gut, and I switched paddocks. And yesterday she needed food, and it was like, wow, you know, and I literally could change the horses that she could see. And I mean, luckily I gave her stress pace and she started eating again, but I ended up putting her back where I moved her from. And it's just, even with all the knowledge I have, I am still reminded at how much they are impacted by stress and how much it impacts on the gut bacteria. And yet you think about how we have stress all the time in their lives. And, you know, Dr. Joe was talking about this sustained stress. So, Joe, can I just hand it over to you to have some input into around stress and inflammation and what it means?
Well, stress is very interesting, just like inflammation, because it is necessary for all animals, mammals in particular, is necessary for their survival. So you have something happens in your environment. We call it an insult in medical terms. You have an insult, whether it's a bee in your bonnet, or you feel captive in a stall, or the enemies are coming here, and your body may not know what's exactly happening, but it actually turns all the switches on, ready to fight, fight or flight. And this stressor through the intermediary cortisol keys your body up to do a couple of things. One of them is you start storing extra fat right away because you say, okay, we may not be able to eat in the next week. Let's take on a lot of extra calories and store it as in energy storage. And also your heart rate goes up. And this is actually part of the immune system. Now, a lot of people think immune system means, oh, I got a cold. That's what immunity means. No, the immune system is the overall system that governs all responses to these insults, whether it's a cut, broken bone, a splinter, or a poison, or a bacteria. Your body responds to these insults, and one of the first things it does is inflammation. That's basically sends out signals that expand your capillaries so that you get more blood to the area. Might be body wide. Your capillaries expand, and that's why it's called inflammation, because it looks inflamed, looks like it's on fire. And here's the problem, though. If you don't regulate that inflammation, your body is looking to attack something, and it ends up, especially these long-term low-level inflammation, they end up attacking yourself. And one of the things that happens is laminitis. So, I mean, laminitis can happen from a sprain, actually. I mean, basically walking around, horses walking around on his toenails, and you can get a lot of the tension there. And then if you don't stop and manage that inflammation, it starts attacking its own self. And all these diseases that you hear about that end in itis, I-T-I-S, it means inflammation. You know, laminitis, inflammation of the laminar under the hoof, and bronchitis, arthritis, bursitis. It's inflammation of these particular areas. And if you don't control that and regulate it, you're in a heap of trouble. So I'm just really glad to hear the doctors talk about these things. We have not actually ever worked together, and we are on the same page, coming from two completely different areas, you know, from plant physiology and animal physiology. We're singing the same song here. It's about the animals not being in their native habitat, and then they end up being under stress, and then end up having too much sugar. And too much sugar, as has been mentioned, too much sugar and insulin, they trigger inflammation themselves. And so they're tied tightly together. Excess glucose, excess sugar, which comes from a unnatural diet, unnatural lifestyle. That's where it comes from. It's the humans that have done that. And then you end up with inflammation, which can come from the sugar. You add to that the horses in a stall, or, you know, a train going by and blowing the horn twice a day. That can cause the same issues, and people don't recognize this. You have those two happen. If you don't manage that, it just explodes.
You. That was amazing. We had a webinar early in the year around stress, but I think we need to revisit it from a different angle and have you both back again and talk about stress, because as horse owners, we forget how much stress we put our horses under constantly. And, you know, we still want to compete, and that involves traveling and a change of environment, all those things. But how do we, it's first of all acknowledging that it's stress and that it has an impact, and how do we manage it? But it's something that we are talking more about. And when we released our stress pace, I'm going a little bit off topic here, but everyone said to me, why didn't you call it a calming pace? Well, it's not a calming pace. It's a stress pace to support all the different functions that happen when a horse is under stress. And so finally, we're starting to understand that, you know, when we take a horse on a float, or as you say in America, when we haul them, I'm starting to learn the American terms, that it is stressful. It's unpredictable. It's uncontrollable. It's hot. It's confined. We get to an event. There's high levels of exercise, their herds change, they could be getting stabled, you may not be able to feed the same hay that you had at home, and then we wonder why they go out and they dish your night or knock the rail or don't perform as well. And then we think it's a training issue. Well, what if it's not? What if it's back as a result of the stress? Anyway, Joe, I get very passionate about this because I look back and think it's something I just haven't recognised. And even in humans, we just forget how much stress has an impact. And as horses, as a flight animal, they're not showing you all the time. And people will say, my horse is calm, therefore it's not stressed. Well, no, that's not how it is. Anyway, thank you for letting me say that. And thank you, Joe, for adding that information. And again, Erin, I think we've probably covered most of this. So we might just keep moving.
All I just wanted to add was, you know, that again, you have to get creative with some of these solutions. And when we say don't starve the laminitic horse, remember that it is abnormal for a horse to go longer than 2 or 4 hours without eating. So starvation starts at 4 hours. It doesn't start at 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours or a day or two. If your horse hasn't consumed any food in 4 hours, it is starving. It thinks it's starving, and its body will start to respond as if it is starving. And I think if you can keep that in mind as you're managing both feeding your horse and your horse's lifestyle, that will make a huge step towards reducing stress and helping to get your metabolism of sugar back under control. And in terms of exercise,
That's very
Sorry?
powerful. That's a powerful stat. 4 hours is starting to starve because so many people will ring about, a diet, and they'll say they stable their horse. And I'll go, do you give them hay at night? Yes, they get 1 or 2 biscuits. And I go, how long are they stable for? Usually about 14 to 16 hours. So it's like the hay's gone. They could be going 8 hours without any food in their stomach. So every night their horse is being starved, and we don't realize it.
No, we don't think about it. And as I said, we're always very happy to help clients and help them work through creative strategies. And we had one lovely lady, I can remember, and her horse had colic surgery twice. And she said, oh, I can't get there after 9 o'clock. How will I keep him from starving overnight? And so, we came up with a solution that she could hang 6 to 8 slow feeders of hay in his stall, because that was the situation that she was in. And so it doesn't mean that you need to be visiting these horses every 4 hours. That would be amazing if you could, but that's not really realistic for most people. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a solution. There isn't a workaround around it. And that we just need to relook at how we are managing our horses and try to do the best thing by them. And sometimes that just means being a bit creative, asking some friends, asking for professional advice, just to try to get outside the box a little bit. And same thing with exercise. We'll move on, but with exercise, you also have to sometimes get creative, make a larger paddock, start hand walking the horse, anything you can do to just get them burning a little bit of fat off. Every small step will make a big change in returning that metabolism to its natural state.
So thank you, Erin.
Yeah, and so from there, just to summarize, I think it's important to note that irregular blood sugar levels or insulin resistance are just as serious for horses as they are for humans. We talk a lot about humans with diabetes now, and horses that have equine metabolic syndrome, they are in that same camp. It is as unhealthy for them. Just, in the 50s and 60s, it became very common for humans to consume a lot of corn syrup. That became the mainstay of the human diet, was corn syrup. We now know that is very bad for humans. It's very unhealthy. It's the same with corn in horses. Horses are not designed to eat corn. It is not healthy for them. It is not good. So we need to reassess how we're managing our horses in the same way that we've reassessed what's healthy for a human being. Correct nutrition, exercise, and careful management of the cornerstones of keeping horses and ponies in tip-top healthy condition. But sometimes that's not enough. And when that's not enough, when you're doing everything you can and it's not working and your horse hasn't responded, or you can't get types of hay that we're recommending, or it's impossible for you to change your horse's management system, that's where we've created our new product, Metabolize. It's designed to help fill the gaps in trying to restore a normal sugar metabolism in a horse.
Did you do this slide?
Well,
Erin?
I guess that's where you'd like me to come on here and say a few words, huh?
That'd be
Yes,
great,
please.
Joe. Joe, just
Uh,
before you start, Erin, there's some amazing questions coming through, and my support team is saying they think they need your input to that. So I don't know whether you can have a look at some of those questions, and if you can't, we can answer them post-webinar. But anyway, over to you, Dr. Joe.
Well, I'm reminded about we used to keep horses. Actually, we were originally going to run a stud in Tennessee, and at the time we were in North Carolina, and we were killing our horses. We were actually killing them because we had the calories right, we had the vitamins right, we had the protein right. But they're living on a light snow-covered pasture most of the day, nibbling on whatever busted up through the snow. And then twice a day, in the morning and the evening, we throw them grain, corn, molasses. That actually tastes pretty good myself. Oats, and it's a good granola bar. And then a flake or two of alfalfa or Timothy grass, and doing that twice a day. So they were actually starving all day, and then just getting shot up with excess glucose out the wahoo, and we were killing them. And they was putting them in stress, and they looked so happy, but they weren't, because we did have a lot of problem. We had inflammation, several things. We had disease, skin disease issues, and we just didn't know that back then. These products that are in Metabolize were discovered in the 60s, but nobody still knew exactly what they were good for. These flavonoids are the colored parts of not just fruits and vegetables. If you see color, you see flavonoids. Actually, flavonoids, flavone means in Latin means color. So flavonoids mean colored bodies. That's why they're so closely related to fruits and vegetables, because they're closely related to the flower part. Almost all flowers have some color, and that color is a flavonoid. They are all very high antioxidant activity because they're just full of hydroxyl groups. They can suck all these free radicals out of almost anything. So that's what at first they thought that they were so good for, scientists back in the 60s. And they said, oh, they're just great free radical scavengers. They're great. But we found out that they did other things, like they reduced the impact of UV radiation. And they said, well, it's probably related to free radicals, because radiation causes free radicals, and free radicals, if left alone, bump into other cells in your body and tear them up. And they're like a spiky thing, and they float around in your bloodstream, and they actually damage tissues. And so you have something like flavonoids that are antioxidants, and they calm that down. But actually, we found out, very interesting, that's not exactly how they're working. And they support thyroid health, a lot to do with that's really tightly close. UV radiation, the first organ that damages is thyroid. I mean, all of this stuff is so tightly interwoven together. And then we found out, of course, they do help control blood sugar. And I would like to say it may not, I don't want to say may boost. I said it absolutely will boost intestinal barrier function. IPS absolutely restores that gut function. And it also promotes the healthy bacteria. It's the probiotic. In fact, flavonoids just recently, as recent as last February, were found to be the #1 desired food of the bacteria, the probiotics. They are the prebiotic for the probiotic, the preferred one. So it all fits together. So let's go on here in the next one.
I'm muted. I think that's fabulous. And particularly that last point about the intestinal barrier function. We know leaky gut happens very quickly with heat stress. It can happen so quickly. So we cannot do enough. We need to do more and more to keep that intestinal barrier function. So thank you.
Well, let's get back to how we opened. This product is not something that was found on the moon or in the middle of the Gobi Desert that, okay, it can help change some problem with you, not just horses, humans, rats, cats, dogs, all mammals. This is actually an essential component of your diet. Let's look at what a horse would do. I don't know, even just 100 years ago, a couple hundred years ago. They had open range. There was no fences. Remember that song, cowboy song, "Don't Fence Me In"? Well, there were no fences. And horses had free range, and they ate a lot of flowers. They ate a lot of clover. They ate a lot of periwinkles. And if you look out across the grasslands, a lot of flowers and a lot concentrated flavonoids. So there's not just in what we consider fruits and berries. I've heard people say, well, my horse doesn't eat blueberries. That's not a natural diet. We're not talking about a specific berry like a blueberry. We're just talking about every flower is a berry. It's a fruit. Every flower is a fruit. The fruit is defined as the ovary and the surrounding tissue. So a flower down in the bottom is a fruit. Whether you eat it for dinner or not, it's got nothing to do with it. So we say fruits and anything that's colored like that. The horses would be grazing on that all the time. You know what they were not grazing on? Alfalfa, Timothy grass, orchard grass, fescue. These are new inventions that we as humans have, in a caring manner, have come up to feed livestock. I mean, look at alfalfa. That's a wonderful product. It's 16, 20, 30% protein. And that's what we call it. Oh, that's a high quality feed. And it can actually kill your horse. So it's just like a candy bar for humans. You have eaten donuts, and it can absolutely it'll destroy the health. So let's say you're back in those days and the horse is continuously eating a lot of roughage, a lot of fiber, consuming quite a bit of flavonoids, and getting proper amount of sugar. Not what by that I mean not too much. Not too much, because these native pasture lands are very poor. We say they're poor in the amount of sugar that's in them. That's actually how you define a good grass. Oh, that's a poor forage. Well, it means we think it doesn't have enough sugar or protein in it. To the contrary, the best feed for a horse is high fiber and not so much sugar. The protein, I will agree, you should have a good protein if you're working out a lot. And then when you have a horse that you're having under stress, which means you're working them, and they need those carbohydrates, but they still need it not in spiky patterns like we give it to them. They need a nice smooth amount. You know, it's just like humans. You know, you talk about EMS. Well, that we just call it MS in humans, metabolic syndrome, and that just means you don't quite have diabetes and you're overweight. You're obese. That's really what it means. You are obese and you don't quite yet have diabetes. Well, so you're pre-diabetic. Now, the first test we ever did in humans was on people with metabolic syndrome. So we started out here. Let me give you just a tiny background on what's going on here. I was director of research for the Florida Department of Citrus, and we were trying to sell citrus. And we said, well, you know, how are we going to sell more grapefruit? We knew that every Christmas, it's about coming up on this time right now, people would get overweight, and then they'd come around this diet, grapefruit diet, and it was a ridiculous diet, but nevertheless, it sold a lot of grapefruit. Every January and February, grapefruit sales go up. So we said, hey, why don't we try to prove if the grapefruit diet works or not? Simple. So we did the test and actually used a Scripps Institute in California. So Florida cooperating with California, that was pretty unusual. And we found out that, you know what? There was something in grapefruit that actually regulated insulin and glucose. It wasn't just that it filled you up. There was something in there. So then we dug down in there and we found out, no, it's not just grapefruit. It's all these fruits and vegetables that have high color. They have what's called flavonoids, and it's the flavonoids that regulate sugar metabolism. So this is my first storyline here, that these flavonoids regulate and were designed to be eaten by us mammals, including horses. They were designed to be eaten along with the sugars, not refine them out, not just take the sugars. This is what we're doing. With humans, it's table sugar. With horses, it's molasses and high sugar grasses. It's the same concept, that we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to eat these flavonoids along with the sugar, and then you get a very nice regulated sugar intake and release into the body, a very nice insulin response. So, you know, on another call, or we can go into the technology, but, you know, I'm not just saying, oh, this is general stuff we found. No, we know exactly what's going on. We know that there's an inhibition of amylase in the mouth. There is an inhibition of glucose transporter 2 in the stomach and the gut. There's an increase in the transporter 4 activity, which takes sugar from the bloodstream into the muscle, into the brain. Inhibition of fat cells, expansion at the G2 phase. You know, we know it right down to on the molecular level. This isn't just some people saying, oh, it kind of helps. You know, that's what you mostly hear. Oh, this sort of helps. We think there's no correlation. It is a direct response. We are meant to eat flavonoids, and when we consume them with sugar, it helps that sugar metabolism. So when you don't have that, you have flavonoid deficiency syndrome, and that means you have an imbalance of your sugars. You've got the insulin and glucose out of whack, and there's also it's actually in the cellular response where the little doorways, this glucose transporter 4, they are transcribed, and translocated. I like to use those words because it makes me sound intelligent. And then the little vacuoles go to the cell membrane, and that is what insulin comes along and opens up. It's a lock and key. It opens it. Glucose can go into that little vacuole and then get into the cell. And that is one of the things that flavonoids regulate. And so it is not, it is a true supplement. It's not some fix-it-all, but you need it. You need to supplement your diet and that of your equine friend because you're not getting enough in your diet. Next. So we started out by that with the grapefruit, and I want to tell you, this is nothing to do with grapefruit. Always people come back and say, "Oh, this is made out of grapefruit." It's not made out of grapefruit. We're talking about the chemicals, the natural ingredient, the molecule in the diet. I don't care where it comes from. It comes from a pink flower, a purple flower, or it's not coming from grapefruit. It's a flavonoid that exists in a lot of plants and animals, but we did identify 3 of them that work together the best. And the first thing we did is a rat study on type 1 diabetic rats. We gave them a combination of these 3 molecules, which I'm going to go into right now: chlorogenic acid, myricetin, and quercetin. We looked at 10,000 combinations using supercomputers, and we came up with these 3 were the best in combination. And we had diabetic rats that if we did not give them this material, they just died. They were type 1. They had no functioning pancreas. And we gave them to the ones we gave to, they thrived. So they went from like 300 and 500 sugar down to 100. And then we moved on to humans, and we did humans with metabolic syndrome. Very same thing happened. They didn't die because you don't let humans die in a laboratory experiment. So they were getting insulin. And the ones we gave this product to, they became non-diabetic in just a couple of weeks. And then we moved on to dogs. Because that happened because the people that needed this product, they said, well, I'm going to give it to my dog. By the way, that's where diabetes was discovered, in dogs first. So I mean, we're just all mammals, and so they gave it to the dogs. And so that made us do studies, and they said, yes, it works great in dogs. And then we got into equine physiology, but right before that, we found out something new. People were coming to us and taking this product because of their blood sugar issues, and was absolutely helping them. And then they started saying, well, I don't have any more arthritis. I don't have any more psoriasis. I don't have any more bursitis, and so we started to look into that, and we came up with the number 2 thing about these flavonoids. And so it's 1 in 1. One of them is blood sugar regulation. The other one is manages the immune system and manages inflammation. It does that by managing the kingpin, the linchpin on the top of the inflammatory pathway. And so if you don't have a management of that part of the pathway, and inflammation comes on through, broken bone, bad diet, or sugar, it just does a runaway wild. It's like putting petrol on a fire. And so, and when you manage that inflammation in the body, it can turn around and heal itself. The body is what heals. So we do not cure any diseases. So people were telling us it cured their arthritis, and they were telling us it cured all types of things. But no, I want to tell you, be sure to never say that. Only thing we're doing is managing the immune system, which is supposed to be the purpose of the flavonoids, and then your body heals itself. So that's the first thing. Chlorogenic acid here, its main purpose in this is to slow down the conversion of starch into simple sugar. And that happens in a horse's mouth immediately. I mean, like 1.5 seconds between putting something like a grain, a cereal grain, in their mouth, it starts changing it almost immediately into simple sugar, which is glucose. If you can slow that down, then you have less available further on in the gut to be rapidly absorbed. So this is you might have heard of these called starch blockers, but that's a silly name. It actually inhibits glucose amylase. Next. Then we have myricetin. Now this is really the chief molecule here. Myricetin is fantastic. It's mostly found in grapes, in dark grapes, but it's not just in grapes. It's in all types of things. So that's why. And I want to tell you again, this is not a grape. We call it a grape extract because we have to get it from somewhere, but it's not have any grapes in it. It's the pure molecule. You can't give grapes to a dog, but you can give pure myricetin to a dog. There's other things in grapes that cause trouble. So, you have to, it's just education. This is just pure myricetin. And myricetin, it used to be called, and it was discovered in the 50s actually, vitamin P, because they found that it made the blood veins very permeable and flexible. And what do you first thing that does? Lower blood pressure. And it's a natural ingredient. So yes, if you actually eat a lot of grapes or drink a lot of red wine, you get lower blood pressure naturally. Nature, Nature. That's the key here. So it used to be called vitamin P, but we have a messed up worldwide vitamin classification system in the US, Australia, Europe, you name it. You know what? You're not allowed to discover any new vitamins. That is actually the law in all countries. If you came up tomorrow with discovered a new vitamin that was essential for you to thrive, it's illegal for you to sell it. You either have to say registered drug. Let me repeat that. You find something natural like we did in citrus and vegetables, and then you say, hey, we found a new vitamin. Our own FDA said, well, you can't sell that as a vitamin because the law says since 1995, you can only sell it as a drug or go to jail. So we started selling it as supplement, and a lot of people are glad we did. So there's no vitamin P, and it also, besides that flexibility, it helps. It slows down glucose transporter 2. That's a little doorway in the lining of your gut. So it slows down the transport of the sugar from your gut into the bloodstream. And it also turns on glucose transporter 4, which is the doorway in your muscle and your brain tissue that puts the glucose into those tissues. So you see what you got? You got it slowed down. First of all, with chlorogenic acid, you have less sugar available. And then what is available, it is slowed down getting into the bloodstream. And then once it's in the bloodstream, it's put into the brain and into muscle tissue where it belongs instead of going into fat tissue. Next slide. And then quercetin. More quercetin's a really nice one. Now it particularly slows down, it's associated with fat, and it does two things. It slows down fatty acids and sugars from entering fatty tissue. It's a fat blocker, you could call it that. But it also will cause sugars and fatty acids to leak back out of fat tissue. Yes, you can actually get quercetin on an empty stomach. If you take a couple 100 milligrams of quercetin, your blood sugar will rise. Think about that. Oh, well, you know what? The problem is it's found in garlic and onions, and you have to eat like 10 pounds of garlic a day to have a big effect here. But that's quercetin's role. So between the three of those, they completely regulate and manage inflammatory system and blood sugar. Next. And so there they are, the three actives. And it is a synergistic action. It's not just one. There's a lot of people that have tried to copy this formula, and they just try to leave one of these out. It just does not work. And they are essential, and I call them a vitamin. Now, I can't legally sell them as a vitamin. We can't tell, what we do. We're a technology company. I don't sell anything. Excuse me. We have patents. And this also worked against Alzheimer's, by the way. So I can't claim to cure Alzheimer's, but if you'll just Google it, everyone knows now that has the training that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. So it's diabetes of the brain. So theoretically, anything that would work on type 2 diabetes could probably work on type 3, and it does actually. So they are essential. Every horse needs this product. You need the product. Why don't you just go ahead and eat it yourself? Everyone needs it. And so there you go. Those are the main deal. They regulate blood sugar. They improve insulin sensitivity. I told you it opens up the little doorways, manages the immune system, and that also main thing is regulates inflammation.
Joe, I could listen to you talk forever. It's amazing. I'm speechless. I'm just writing notes, but I just want to keep listening. There's so much to be excited about with this product. And we're about to move on to the journey to metabolize. But what's been amazing is that you've shared years and years and years of research behind this patented formulation, Emulin, which is what Metabolize is built on. So we're going to have to get you back because I'm sure there are so many questions coming through about everything you've said. I just get hopeful the more that you talk. And I loved how you explained that these flavonoids are meant to be consumed alongside with sugars. So they're working together. Yet we haven't had that as humans or as horses. So let's move on. If you've got questions, please send them through. You're probably sitting there just a bit blown away like I am. The knowledge, what I love, Jo, you also have the knowledge of the horses as well. So you're bringing your plant physiology knowledge as well and applying it in a real sense. And just to reinforce how grateful we are to have Erin here, because as an equine vet, she has been so open to learning all of these things. And I'll hand it over to Erin to talk about her role in the trial. But hopefully you're all listening and going, we actually do have hope. And again, it's nature. So introducing Metabolize. Metabolize has only been on the market a short time. And we are now starting to get the testimonials coming in. And most of the testimonials are coming in with awe. People are going, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how quickly the fat lumps have gone down, the cresty neck. It's almost, you get very emotional because there are people, somebody sent through a testimony about a mare that had been so laminitic, and she sent through some video of her before Metabolize and then a couple of weeks later, and you just can't believe the change. And listening to you, Jo, it all starts to make even more sense. I thought it made sense before, but now I'm understanding it. So Metabolize is taking all this research that Jo's done, all his knowledge and incredible research, and we are so blessed and honoured that Jo has trusted us with this formulation to bring it to market. And this is, we've launched it in Australia. We hope to take this, and it's in New Zealand as well. So it's a very exciting product. I'm just going to quickly talk about this because I feel like we've had so much credibility listening to Jo's research. But literally, this is, this patented formulation has been happening for a long time. And I then managed to try it on one of my ponies, and it was like, oh my goodness, can that crested neck have really gone down that quickly? So we then kept on moving forward, and we followed working with Erin and with other vets and other people. We then created a trial design, and we got ethics approval. And then and Erin, I'll get you to talk in a moment about what we did with the study. But we've actually, this isn't something we've just kind of, as Erin said, Jo said, pulled from Mars and just brought it to market. This is based on years and years and years and years of research. We've done our own field studies. We've done the vet supervised trial. We've then had other people trialing it before we brought it to market. And we are so proud of where this product's leading. So what are we trying to achieve with this product? I think it's really clear. It's about providing an opportunity when all those other aspects aren't working. But now listening to Jo speaking, it's almost like, it was always meant to be fed to horses. They've always meant they should have flavonoids in their diet, whether they've got insulin dysregulation or not. But what we are doing is really targeting horses that are really critical, that have got that current, that constant cycle of inflammation and laminitis. And so we can change their life, give them a better quality of life so they can start enjoying their own life, being able to move more freely. And what's been interesting, although that we are targeting horses that are insulin dysregulated, we have had quite a few clients saying, I've got a horse that isn't insulin dysregulated. Can I give it to them? They've come back and said, oh my goodness, they are moving more freely. They're not tying up anymore. So now listening to you, Jo, I can see why. So Erin, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm just aware of the time. We've just hit an hour, but I think this is really important just to quickly talk about what you saw in the trial, Erin. And then we'll finish up at the end with just some testimonials. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Linda. I just want to say I've been getting to as many questions as I can. And obviously anyone we don't get to, we'll make sure your questions get answered after the webinar. So the field study that we did on Metabolize was a small clinical field study. And what we wanted to look at was the safety, the palatability, and the efficacy of Metabolize. We had some really exciting and positive results in the study, which gives us great confidence in this product. And we're also in the planning stages of performing a much larger study, which would be for peer-reviewed publication. But this clinical trial was really to check, was this safe to feed to horses? Would horses eat it? And would we see positive results? Next slide, please, Linda. So we want to talk to you a little bit about Shadow, who is one of our case studies. And Shadow was one of the ponies in our study who I had actually known personally for 10 years prior to the study. He was an aged, retired, absolutely beloved show pony who'd been with his current owner for more than 10 years. He had been diagnosed with Cushing's disease, equine metabolic syndrome, and chronic laminitis. His owner was absolutely dedicated to Shadow and was doing everything she could to try to keep him healthy and happy. But one of the reasons that we decided to include Shadow in the study was that despite her trying everything to do right by him, he had become so lame and so depressed that they were actually considering euthanasia. They felt that Shadow's quality of life was not fair for him to continue to be on the earth. He basically was in the dreaded Jenny Craig paddock 24/7. He refused to move. He just stood at the back of the pen, was very lame. They couldn't do anything with him. He was very depressed. And as much as they loved him, they actually thought it would be kinder for Shadow to not be with us anymore. So that's one of the reasons we chose to include him in the study. And the results in him were absolutely fantastic. Within days, he was more mobile. He wanted to walk willingly around the pen. Within a week, he was actually volunteering to move forward. He was happy to see people. He would trot up to the gate. They were able to start turning him out of this dirt yard effectively into a round pen, and he was volunteering to exercise. Fatty lumps reduced, crusty neck reduced, and the change in his quality of life just in a short 2-week period was absolutely amazing. And it was one of the things that really convinced me how much this product has been needed, because there are so many people out there doing everything they can for these animals. And often you've inherited this problem. You bought a pony or a horse that someone else has wrecked by feeding it the wrong thing or keeping it in the wrong way. You may not have done anything wrong to this horse, and then you've acquired it, and now you're trying to do the right things. And no matter, I've had so many questions so far of people telling me they're doing all the right things and they're still struggling. And that's where you do need help. And that is exactly what Metabolize was designed to do, was to help you fill those gaps where you're just not having success. Which actually takes me to my next slide. So Metabolize is designed to help a broad group of horses and ponies who suffer from varying types and stages of insulin dysregulation, whether that is brought about by lifestyle and diet, or whether that is brought about by a hereditary condition or a genetic predisposition. All of these horses are included in that umbrella. As Dr. Ahrens discussed, it also has some really interesting and exciting anti-inflammatory properties for horses with respiratory issues, horses with tying up issues, other sorts of inflammatory issues. I've actually been giving it to horses with arthritis as well, because as Dr. Ahrens said, itis just means inflammation, and inflammation isn't specific to the lamina. It happens in the gut, it happens in the joints, it happens in the lamina, it happens in the brain, it happens in the nervous system, it happens in the respiratory system. So we see it most quickly in the lamina because that's a part of the horse that is the most poorly designed. So we often see the inflammation there first, but it goes everywhere in the body, and you will see problems in different horses over time in different areas. So for me, it's also really exciting for those horses suffering from other inflammatory processes as well. And, as a vet, we have a lot of drugs in our toolbox, and sometimes drugs and medication are the right thing, but we also know, same as in humans, nothing medical comes without a side effect. So when you give your horse a drug, whether that's an NSAID or an antibiotic, there are consequences to that as well as good. So anytime we can choose a natural product over a drug product, I'm all for that. I want to save drugs for when we have no other choice, because consequences of drugs are really important to keep in mind as well.
Yes. And do you want me to just jump in here? I just wanted to, this is just a quick slide that in terms of some of the questions that we get asked. I think you have touched on some of these. People are saying, if I'm feeding Metabolize, can I feed it with the medication that my horse is on? For example, and I can never pronounce it, there's the new one, the one that is about, might have an impact on the liver. How do you pronounce that one, Erin?
Ergoflatosin.
That's the one, yes. Can I feed it along with that? Do I feed it with other medication? So if you have any questions about those things, come through to us, because that's where Erin is amazing. We just send those straight through to her, and then she will let us know if that's okay. Another question we get asked is, if you are feeding Digestive EQ, which is our foundation product with Poseidon, does that mean I can switch from Metabolize? No, they're very different. They work so beautifully together and that's what so many people are doing. It's, obviously we've always got budgetary constraints. So if you've got a horse that is really, really struggling with that insulin dysregulation, you've got to choose. Perhaps you can start with Metabolize and see how you go. But they do work on different areas. They just have great synergy together. And that's what we're loving. So they don't replace each other. They have very different roles. Erin, did you want to have any comments about some of the questions you've had through about, can I feed Metabolize with something?
Yeah, so Metabolize is very safe and has no counterindications with any of the things that people are asking about, any of the medications that horses are currently on. As we've said, it's an all natural product. It's a product that should be in a horse's diet, that your horse should already be consuming, and they are not because of the way that we have domesticated them. So all you're really doing is adding in something that they're missing, which I think is really important to remember. And that a lot of these problems that we're seeing are man-made in the same way that type 2 diabetes is man-made. We have changed the way that we are looking after our horses. And sometimes the old saying, kill them with kindness. We are trying to be kind to these horses, but as Dr. Erin said, we're actually killing them. So I have no issues with feeding Metabolize alongside any of those medications, alongside the other supplements. If you have a particular question, absolutely, please send it through. But most of the questions I'm getting are really about people who are trying to do the right thing and they're still struggling. So this is a perfect product for them. And hopefully you've gotten some helpful information here.
Yes, thanks, Erin. And I am absolutely going to organise another webinar early in the new year so we can look at this further, because I have lots of questions about stress and horses that haven't been perhaps on such high grain or high sugar diets that are still having insulin dysregulation. Where does stress fit in? And often these are show ponies that have been out and that constant, competition and all those things. I just would like to know more about where that role fits in. So we're nearly finished. I just wanted to share, and we've just updated these because we've done a few of these webinars and we're getting more and more testimonials. And again, I think sometimes before and after photos don't actually represent exactly the changes, but this one really does. And you can see the changes there. The other thing that we're finding is that a lot of geldings will be swollen around the sheath, and that's also something they're finding that's going down with Metabolize. But this is a wonderful testimonial from a pony that's been on Metabolize, and we're finding, particularly because it's a new product and because people don't understand flavonoids, it really has been some of the people that are really quite desperate. They just haven't found anything else. And so for them to get these results is remarkable. But the fact that they're saying they're happier, and like Erin spoke about Shadow, they're just happier. And then this is another one that came up recently. And again, in what they're saying is also remarkable, that the farrier could see the changes. So, I could share so many more testimonials now. In fact, I was like, what other ones am I going to add? But this is just to give you an indication of what's happening. So now that it's been out there, and of course, there'll always be some horses that won't have such a quick response. It may take longer, but we're just putting back in what we've taken out. So it's just the most amazing opportunity, and we have learnt so much today. I'm just moving along quickly because I'm aware of the time. But before we finish, if you do have any further questions, please send those through. I'm not sure, Erin, are there any that are kind of standing out that people have been asking that you want to refer to right now? Or Jo, is there anything you want to add that we haven't covered?
I think we've covered quite a lot of it. And actually, as I'm getting questions through, we have actually answered quite a few of them as we've been talking. So I think that's great. And as I've said, any specific, we try not to give blanket advice. We want to really make sure that we stand by our advice and we're giving you the right information. So if it's a very individual question, I want to assess each case individually and try to give you specific advice for your horse. But don't hesitate to ask us any questions. You can always reach out to us, and we've got a team of, veterinarians, nutritionists, and people that want to help you and want to provide the education. That's why we're here, is to provide the education first and foremost.
Now, we apparently have a question from Jill Davies that is targeted to Dr. Joe. Now, I can't actually see that question. Hang on, I'm just getting it shown to me. Does Dr. Joe think Emulin will boost nitric oxide to help open blood capillaries in the hoof capsule? And Jill and I were talking about that the other day, so I'm glad you've asked that question, Jill.
Well, yes, it will, but it's not a direct function. So it doesn't particularly inhibit or enhance any of the enzymes associated with nitric oxide production, but it'll go up, but it's indirect. So I don't want to claim, oh yeah, this is something for NO2 production. But, it gets back to, I hear a lot of questions are often saying, well, my horse or my father or human has this issue. Will this product help? And yes, absolutely. It'll put the animal's body back to where it needs to be in order to heal itself. That's the best way to do it. So that nitrous oxide balance will absolutely return towards a normal homeostasis. Because without these products in your bloodstream, any animal, and human, baby, whatever, you're not functioning properly. Also, we're talking about horses that have health issues. Horses that you think are in good condition are also not in good condition, because they do not have this in their diet. They are not functioning properly. It's exactly like the human athletes that tell me, I used to run so many kilometers every morning, and then now I can do 25% more of that. Well, it has not done anything at all about helping you run faster. You just put your body back where it should have been to begin with. And that's just like, if you have a horse, a race horse, they should also be in this product. That also, the last point is just related to about, is there any counterindications? Every single horse should be on this product, because if you have a mare, nursing mare, hey, what would she normally be eating? Ask yourself that. She'd be having these flavonoids in a native pasture, and it would be in her milk, and she'd lactate that out. So the foal needs it too. So everyone, sick, healthy, athletic horse, couch potato horse, they all need it.
Fabulous. Look, we have to finish, but we will certainly revisit this at another day. But just to finish, we do have an exclusive offer from EQ Salary, and they have given a discount code that's on the screen right now. So I've looked at the numbers, and pretty much I'd say 99% of people have stayed right to the end. So Erin and Joe, that is all credit to you, because what you've offered has been so interesting and informative. People have stayed, and I do a lot of webinars, and there's not many I've stayed to the end for. So that is fabulous. So there is the code for you to use an EQ Salary online, and it's valid until the 6th of December, 1 use per customer. So thank you, EQ Salary, for offering that. And then we've got a prize that Jeff spoke about at the beginning. So the person's name who I'm about to read out, after the webinar, if you can then contact us, and we can then organise you getting your prize, and that is for Heidi White. So Heidi, well done, congratulations. And again, thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you, EQ Salary. Thank you, Jeff, for your generosity. Erin and Joe, thank you for your, being so generous in your knowledge and your passion. And I have enjoyed this. This is the first webinar we've done with you, Joe, but look out, because now there's going to be plenty more. And I think I need to fly over to do something in person with you. That will give me a chance to go to America again. Thank you again. And this is a really exciting opportunity to give our horses, a better quality of life. And I keep quoting, a client said to me just recently, how do we make what we do for horses okay for them? And I just love that quote, and I keep saying it. This is a way that we can do that. We can put back into their diet what they should be getting anyway. So thank you. We have still got lots of questions. Erin, thank you for answering some of those. And Joe, we will take those on board and send those out. And we are sending out a poll around the website. Has that gone up about the website today? That's okay. Could be nice to get your feedback. What did you like? What would you have liked more of? Anything else? Because this is something we want to do more of. And we just want to make sure that what we deliver is of relevance. But the fact that you've all stayed pretty much to the end tells me that today was very relevant. So I'm just going to leave it up just for, I guess, another minute. And yeah, I just can't say thank you enough. I've learned, I really love the information about flavonoids being a prebiotic for the gut bacteria. That is fascinating. And Jill Davies, who asked a question before, she's an amazing equine nutritionist. And we were chatting the other day about a product she was using that was full of flavonoids way back, which did a trial, and how much the horses loved it. It's like they know what they need. So we're just putting it back in. Oh, look, it's the poll going off about have they found it helpful? Yes, it's just going, everyone's can't even keep up with the responses. So that is fabulous. Thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. And thank you so much for trusting Poseidon and come along and sharing your hour with us.